Art has the power to change the world, and behind every work of art is the story of an artist and their culture. What inspires an artist to create? What sustains their practice? And what does success really mean? Join me, Nicholas Roman Lewis, as I explore the inner worlds of artists, bringing you into their studios, their histories, and taking you beyond the border. Painter, mythmaker, truth-teller, sage, Jamea Richmond-Edwards is a modern-day alchemist creating monumental, mixed-media works from what others consider scraps. Her work is an explosion of Black pride, and in particular, a celebration of fashion and adornment of the Black body. With mystical references to her African and Native American heritage, her canvases reveal an origin story of serpents, floating orbs, ancient prophecies, and ultimately, the power in our beauty. Hello, Jamea.
Hi, Nicholas.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me into your studio, your sacred space.
Thank you.
And I think it's really special because we are literally in a cathedral. Yes. And I think that is so fitting for this, conversation with you because your work is so spiritual, at least for me, right?
Okay.
And so we're going to talk about, kind of my thoughts about your work, but I have so many adjectives, but I don't want to put any labels on you. So I always like to ask an artist from your mouth and your words, tell us a little bit about your work, how you describe yourself and your practice.
I'm just a girl from Detroit, and we are filming this in Detroit. I just recently relocated back to the city after being away for 21 years.
Wow.
So this interview is really special. It's really important for me. So yeah, I'm from Detroit, born and raised, and so that is really it's really synonymous with my work, because coming back to Detroit, I realized how much of a Detroiter I am and how much this city has influenced my work. My work currently, and I would say over the past couple of years, my work has transitioned into mythology.
Okay.
And I say mythology in terms of this act of storytelling that I grew up hearing my mother and my aunts. These urban legends from the hood. And oftentimes there were supernatural elements to this story, to these stories. And so as I began creating my work, specifically, you're going to hear me say since 2020, because there was a major shift in my work. If you've been following it, the work has incorporated these very supernatural elements in it. So I like to look at my paintings as epics. I look at myself as a storyteller. So,
I love it.
And just really giving myself the space and agency to explore whatever corner of my imagination, that I feel is appropriate. So within my work, you will see a lot of orbs, a lot of serpents. Now I'm calling they're dragons. So yeah, I'm a mixed media, interdisciplinary myth maker.
I love it. I love it. So I think this is good. So, your work is bold, it's vibrant, it's colorful.
Yeah.
You talked about, you just mentioned how Detroit it factors into that, and you're realizing that. But I want to go back just a little bit and tell you how I came about your work. So this was maybe 10 years ago or 8 years ago. I went to an exhibit in Harlem, and I saw this work, and I wasn't collecting art then. I was trying to, because honestly, I didn't know that I could, right? Even though went to college, got a job, I was like, I didn't know, I could be a collector.
Yeah.
So I went and I saw this work, and you now told me it was, if you look closely, you will see God.
Yeah.
And this was a diptych of a woman floating.
Yeah.
And can you just tell me a little bit about that piece?
Yeah.
and because I know it's very special to you.
Absolutely.
And I think it will reveal how, why it means so much to me as well.
The piece, if you look closely, you will see God. This was from a series that I did, and I only did it that one time of black ink on black paper. So the work has a very iridescent quality to it. This piece was created a few months before my brother was murdered here in Detroit. And so that piece, because I'm a drawer as well, so I paint, but I'm a drawer at my essence. I remember the drawing the piece and my hand was dying. My hand was literally falling asleep because I was cross-hatching it, and as I was creating this piece, it became very meditative. And it's a figure laying in a tree in a starry background. And oftentimes when I title the paintings, I don't know what they mean. It's something very intuitive, something very improvisational. And it takes me years to understand. And so the painting is very dichotomous. So on one end, if you look closely, you will see God is looking at the black figure, right? Looking at the idea of melanin, the idea of carbon, which is 666, right? And so exploring that. And then also this figure is looking up into the sky, you know what I mean? And so that's a very, very special piece for me. And what's really interesting about that body of work, because it's black ink on black paper, it's almost impossible to photograph.
It's difficult to photograph, but not necessarily to remember. And so that piece for me has stayed with me for years now. And that to me is the power of art, and that's why I'm doing this, not just to, talk to an artist and get into your world, but I really want people to understand that. And so, that piece, because I forgot, at the time I was like, I didn't write the name of the artist down, but I just knew the work, and I knew how it made me feel. And fast forward to, I was watching Empire, and I was like, I know that there's a piece. I was like, I know that artist. I was telling my partner, I was like, Norman, I know this artist. And so, so that piece that was featured in Empire is Wings Not Meant to Fly, which I also know is all your work is special and personal to you. But I think there's an even deeper connection to that work.
So that painting, I created that during my tenure at Howard University, and it's so interesting. I remember creating that piece. It did not get a favorable critique, when you present it in front of your peers and your professors. But that piece was inspired by my aunt, my aunt Watna, who was murdered in 2007 here in Detroit, and was really fascinating because throughout her life she battled drug abuse. But even in spite of that, I always, when I would see her, when I would talk to her, she was my aunt. And so as I was studying religious iconography, it dawned on me, I would see these figures of, the Virgin Mary or the various saints or deities. It dawned on me, I can place my family within as the figures.
Exactly.
And so that's what that piece essentially represents, Wings Not Meant to Fly. And, although my aunt's life was cut short, she, all birds aren't necessarily meant to fly, but that doesn't take away from their power. It doesn't take away from, the flights that's on the ground, you know what I mean? So that's what that piece, their purpose, their journey. So that's what that piece represents. And so that body of work, my thesis for Howard was Medusa as an archetype, and I was really inspired by this archetype of the ugly mother, and looking at my family, particularly my aunt, and that piece was my therapy to sort of address this really gruesome murder of her that happened. And so, you know, I canonized her, and you know, that painting.
Come on, speak on it. You canonized her.
I, Jamea Richmond-Edwards, canonized my aunt. And so, you know, fast forward, it's on this television show, Empire. And I'm just now making that connection as we were having this conversation. So here it is, you know, her legacy, her life is on one of the most, you know, pivotal, groundbreaking television shows, you know, in American history.
I mean, can we just talk about the power of your art? Let me be real. Your art.
Absolutely.
Not just the power of art, but your art. So your work, that the first one, and then on your aunt, that inspired me, your work, to be a collector.
Wow.
Not Romare Bearden, not all these people who I love, because I never knew that I could do that, even though, you know, we study art and we, you know, supposed to be bougie and all that stuff and blah, blah, blah. But like, I was like, that your connection, I was like, maybe I'm supposed to be doing this. And of course, you know, thanks to Lee Daniels and Empire and all that, for centering us and our art.
Absolutely.
And then let's go even deeper. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I mean, like, that is also your aunt's story. That she's inspiring. And that's why I'm glad that you were able to tell this story.
Absolutely.
Because I mean, she's looking out. You know, so how many years later are people going to see those reruns?
Absolutely.
And then look at that artwork and then be connected. So thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you for that. That's actually really amazing. And, you know, I'm just making that connection, and it really speaks to the importance of art and legacy and telling our story. And, you know, just the importance of art, you know, art, that television show being a piece of art itself. So yeah, that piece was extremely special.
You know, and I look at it too, I said I had adjectives for you. And you're definitely an alchemist, but you're a bit, you know, and kind of like, you know, you're like Edward Scissorhands. I'm gonna call you Mrs. Edward Scissorhands, because you're just like up in there doing it, making it. It's flying, the paper and all that stuff. You're creating magic. I love that you talked about the mythology. But you know, being Black in America, and I know that you even have a journey about understanding your genealogy and learning more about your Black and Indigenous roots.
Absolutely.
But, you know, the pain of loss of your brother, of your aunt, and then you, as an alchemist, transforming that through your art, that pain into beauty and then into inspiration. I mean, this is me.
That's
this is what I feel.
Because I use the term alchemy. That's a word, and I like, when I talk about my art and my life practice, I like to go into the taboos, and you know, those are words that you don't necessarily use. Is alchemy, because that's essentially what it is. It's taking these pieces of paper or ideas and transforming it. So how you know, 2020 was the year, is when
So what happened in 2020? Tell me.
Lord, 2020 was that was the vision. 2020 was the best worst year for many of us, and you know, that was that year where it forced me to kind of deal with myself. It slowed me down, moving fast pace, to kind of look in the mirror, to look within, and to really examine my work closely. And as I began entering into the studio, because that was the only place I could, you know, we were on lockdown or quarantining, I was blessed to have access to my studio, and as I was looking around, I'm like, yo, I'm really an alchemist. This is literal alchemy. And when we, you know, well, when I study ancient art, there really wasn't a word for art when you read in ancient texts, because it was so much a part of our, you know, ritual. It was a part of our, you know, how we praise and so forth. And so for me, I'm like, I need to make sure that when I'm creating these pieces, I'm activating it with a certain intentionality, right?
Yes.
And so I don't even look at, myself as making art. I feel like these paintings are prayers.
Wow.
They are meditations. And as I'm, kind of having a better understanding of my art, I began to understand Black people more. Coming from a city like Detroit, that's what we would, people would say it's very materialistic, right? And if we're in this cathedral, we're in this temple, and if we look at ancient texts, the body is a temple. It makes sense why we adorn our bodies the way we adorn it. So I began connecting those dots in terms of how I fashion the materiality in my work, and also, how I began to, to fashion my own body. So for me, I began just viewing it outside of the very mundane, and like, let's look at it from a deeper lens.
The way I look at it or interpret is that, you're also reclaiming, you talked about this adornment. Sometimes it's particularly put on, Black people as a negative. As opposed to, I'm looking at you now, and I was like, I wanted to make sure our shots, because you're fierce.
Okay, thank you.
And this is how, why not?
Yeah.
And it's not, this is like an expression of who you are, but also it's not, this is like history.
Yes.
The adornment and, African tribes and the headpieces and the feathers and the beads and, even the indigenous culture, here Native Americans, all of that. And for other people to take that away. So I love, your work.
Yes.
You're not supposed to touch it, but it's like so, it's just coming out.
Absolutely.
That luxury, that texture, the patterns.
Yes.
And then within that, it's the story, right?
Yeah. And you said something really interesting, because as so I'm like from here, and I've been out in the DMV area for the past 15 years, and what I find myself as I enter in certain spaces, perhaps maybe corporate spaces, there's this idea, not just for myself, but many Black people, we have to like mute ourselves. We have to neutralize ourselves. Yeah. We have to, make sure that we're not too loud, or we're not too, we don't offend with our energy. And so 2020 is the first year I also started painting my figures in. And I also realized as I was like really unpacking myself and like, why do I paint the way I paint? Why was I doing my figures in grayscale? What is that all about? And it really dawned on me, like I had issues with like colorism, right? Like in terms of me wanting to have darker color skin and me being ashamed of like my red skin. Like this is so, it's so many layers to this, because the work is literally art therapy. If you want to know what's in my mind, like this is my work. So these works becoming more vibrant and colorful is really allegorical to me, kind of like reclaiming, my truth, and like really, activating my mother, my sister, the women in my family who are like really loud. You know what I mean? And I remember growing up, I would be kind of embarrassed of that, or, we've all been in spaces where we feel like, okay, I need to kind of tone it down, or you're at a restaurant and you see the Black table laughing loud, like don't be too loud. And, I'm just like, no, we need to subvert that.
Let the light shine.
We need to let the light shine. Yeah. So I'm using my body as a tool for that, and my art as a tool for that as well.
So Jamea, I've heard you say that you're a vessel for the work, and perhaps that, the artwork is a physical manifestation, of your growth.
Yeah.
Tell us about that, and how you want, or, reflections of how the viewer interacts and experiences your work on that spiritual level.
Well, I think the work it's a physical manifestation of my growth, but to me, I think it's bigger than that, because like I know for a fact the work that I create is far more advanced than me. And I create these pieces And it takes me months, maybe years to catch up to the understanding of it. So for example, this was maybe 2019 or 2018 where, you know, I felt really compelled to use serpents in my work, and I didn't understand why. And I'm just like, I don't know why, but you know, something was in me that moved me like, no, you have to create this and do it. So the work is an entity of itself, and it reminds me of, remember the movie Little Shop of Horrors?
Of course, yeah.
And that plant, like, feed me.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what the art is.
Oh,
it's
really?
commanding me. Yeah,
Wow.
I'm like, it's like, no.
Are you in a zone?
I'm in a zone. I'm definitely zoned out, and you know, I make this you will hear me say in previous interviews, 2020 was the first time, you know, my spirituality and my art practice sort of, you know, merged, coalesced with one another. And so it's like, I'm not even aware, like when I complete these paintings, I'm amazed, like, wow. Damn, I did this. So these pieces, there's a larger agenda at play that I'm unraveling, right? And what I mean agenda is like, it's, you know, understanding the world is about understanding myself, right? If I understand myself, I understand you, I understand how to relate to you, the world, nature around me. So I feel like this work is, you know, literally lessons for me to unfold. And I'm a mother, I have 3 sons, and you know, those are also my creations. And you know, there's a saying like, I'm, you know, teaching my children how to, you know, I'm teaching them, but you know, the reality is they're teaching me how to be a mother, you know what I mean? And so I look at the work as, you know, another one of my creations is teaching me how to be an artist. So, you know, I don't know what the viewer takes from it. You know, it's, you know, just even hearing you tell me about that. I mean, it's like kind of really, it's really overwhelming to be just completely transparent with you. And so my process, when I look at these cathedrals or these amazing artworks that I admire, we have the Detroit Institute of Arts, and I'm always in awe, like how the level of ingenuity, and as I understand my practice, sometimes there are things moving in us, you know, spiritually or whatever you want to call it, that's far more intelligent than us, that's driving this boat, especially when we talk about like art.
Well, I mean, I think there's definitely could be the way I look at it. Okay. And since this is my show, I'm gonna say it.
Okay.
Right?
All right.
A spiritual through line, right? So, you know, clearly, you know, your work is collage work, and you're now expanding, multidisciplinary. You're using, you know, different mediums. But we can look at Romare Bearden and where, you know, his journey. Yeah. We look at, you know, Mickaleen Thomas now, who's also multidisciplinary work, but you know, started in that collage, that texture. Someone like Howardina Pendle, who is all about the circle. You know, I mean, and it's her work is just these, you know, some of it is just this meticulous, you know, very meditative process. So there's this definite through line that, I don't know, maybe you're somewhere back in the whole, you know, the universe is connecting all the dots. And you know, your particular way of reaching out and connecting with people, and that's Jamea's expression.
Absolutely.
But let's talk about, you know, that kind of, you know, that legacy of artists. Your practice, your business is growing. Yes. You've got monumental works that you've been producing. Talk about that. I just saw this amazing piece in your studio. Tell us about how your practice has grown.
Oh man. So a couple of things are, you mentioned legacy, and my response to legacy, or what I think of legacy, is twofold, right? One is the institutional legacy. So, you know, I come from Howard University. I was really blessed to come up under the tutelage of Akili Ron Anderson and James Phillips, who are Afro-Cobra artists. And I remember being in undergrad, you know, age 19, and I went to Jackson State University in Mississippi, And I took an African American art class, and I opened up that book and I saw a Jeff Donaldson painting, and I was just like, oh my gosh. And what I was responding to was the color. Like, how was he able to construct these pieces? I just couldn't quite figure it out. So you know, I'm really blessed to come from that line, and I look at myself as like the continuum of that legacy coming from Howard. You know, Howard is a very specific canon in terms of scholarship and aesthetics. So that's one part, right? The other part of legacy is my mother. Okay. Is my father and my ancestry. And my mother's a dancer, my mother's a dresser, you know, same thing with my father. A lot of times when we talk about our upbringing and our accolades, it's typically institutional, but I'm like, well, it's really more so my community. So I have my mother who inspired me, you know. My mother, she would wear her mink coats, her outfits, she would go Chicago stepping, Detroit ballrooming, and she would have her costumes with her wigs. Her partner, her dance partner, would coordinate with her, which coordinated with their Cadillac, right? Yeah, okay. So of course. There's this, so you know, in Detroit is the hair capital was the hair capital. I don't know if it still is. Detroit and Atlanta. You know, I grew up in the 90s with the treetop ponytails. You know, the hair being very sculptural, right? Of course, yeah. Detroit was also known as the Gator capital. Detroit is Motor City. I'm a continuum of that legacy of just looking at like just how we coordinate with color and textures. And so, you know, here I am today able to create these monumental pieces, which is really a gumbo of like all these things, including Motown and techno music. My work is straight up techno. You know, when I look at it, so just in terms of rhythmically, like that's my work. And so I'm just looking at it like this is it's alive. Your work. It's alive. Your work. So I think, you know, 100 years from now. Okay. Like, I mean, I would love to know what people are going to think because you know, you go now and you Rubens, you know, the old, you know, like what these people were doing, but like you're like, well, okay, what was going on? Because I'm looking at this painting that I'm doing now, which is going to go in the Mississippi Museum of Art and the Baltimore Art Museum. And I'm just like, wow, I cannot wait to see this piece in those spaces. But that also speaks to like seeing Black people in those spaces. Exactly. It belongs there. It belongs there. These museums and institutions are in cities that have been historically and anciently melanated cities that have been, you know, whitewashed or literally omitted. So I'm looking at this as me asserting, you know, kind of it's a birthright thing as well, right? That stems from my, you know, my family and also like my bloodline. So, you know, I'm also like extremely privileged to be able to make monumental work, to even look at my story as, you know, Detroit growing up during the 80s crack epidemic, AIDS epidemic, and I'm able to create these monumental pieces. And I remember I was at an art residency a couple of years ago, and I was describing my work like, you know, I create monumental pieces, and you know, a young woman put me aside and was like, that's pretty major for you to make monumental. And when you think of monuments, you think of, you know, the sculptures of, you know, white colonizers that's throughout the city, and here I am, you know, with this agency, no permission. This is something that I'm doing. So, you know, I'm just pushing the work as far as I possibly can. Permission is not requested or required. That part. That part. So I'm excited to see where this journey takes me, because like I'm calling it submitting to the process. Like I'm submitting to this work and it's telling me to go larger.
Jamea, talk about monumental. I mean, I walk in your studio and literally you painting the entire wall.
Yeah.
Tell me about this.
It was a commission, and it is inspired by my family's great migration. My family migrated many times. And so as I began thinking about it, and when I started making this painting, at the time I was literally migrating from the DMV area back to Detroit.
Wow.
So it as I was creating this piece, it was a kind of a light bulb went off on how cyclical history is. Mm-hmm. And as I was trying to envision, which of my family members to create as we talk about this concept of migrating, I decided I can talk about us in the now, because we're literally migrating now, and we are literal manifestations of our ancestors, right? So yeah, I'm creating this piece, and it's such a privilege because this is my mother, me, my husband, my sister, my niece, and my 2 sons. I have a 3rd son, but he's going to be somewhere flying on a dragon, right? Wow. My paintings are not easy. Yeah. And it's really challenging. So I look at them like climbing mountains. Each painting is literally like putting a jigsaw puzzle together, because I'm not only working off of like rhythm, it's also balancing color.
Exactly.
So I have to do it.
Well, I'm feeling the emotion. So I know this is a work in progress.
Yes.
And we all know that your work, it's the layers and it's all built up. But right now, their gaze. It's just like they're following me. They're not just following, but it's like they have something to tell me.
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. When I'm telling a story, not only am I telling a story through the eyes, right? Mm-hmm. I'm also looking at the body, looking at the vernacular of how I'm designing their clothing. So, as a storyteller, I'm trying to figure out how can I tell the most epic story on this 2D space and insert as many Easter eggs or hints. I have so much to say, and when people meet me, I have so much to say, and I look at my artwork the same way, right? I just put it all in there. I'm using paint. I'm using paper. I draw on top of it. I use fabric. I'm adorning with rhinestones and glitters.
What type of applique is this?
So this is just paper. This is decorative paper.
Decorative.
Yeah. So a lot of times with my papers, I'm either hand making the papers or I'm purchasing them. So it's a combination of the two. Oftentimes it's old paintings that I did on paper that I'll cut up and I'll include it in. I used to be an art teacher, and so each year we throw out tons of students' old artwork that they didn't want to take home. So I still have some of those pieces that I just collage up in mosaic, and I'll incorporate that. So it's literally infusing so much history. I'm using a lot of materials.
In something like this, the time it takes to finish it. I know you talk about the research as the first thing that you do.
Oh my gosh, yeah, it's an ongoing process. This piece has literally been, let me see, July. About 6 months.
Wow.
About 6 months. But it's the part of the process is the research component of it. So, I'm incorporating dragons, these horned serpents into my works, and I need to read as much on dragons as I possibly can so I can understand it. And just let it unfold. Also, like one of my techniques, especially being in Detroit, is I just like to go out and look at people. Yeah. And that's my color palette. That's my color theory is Black folks. Looking at how, my mother designed her home. That's, I'm like, I need to see, just gather all this knowledge to, to put it into work.
This is the first time your family's been in your work? Or
This is first time, yes, it actually is. This is the first time I'm putting my physical family, like representations of them. My work is always inspired by them, but I don't typically put them in. I'll put in an avatar, is what I call them, in place of them. But this is where I'm actually using them as models to create this piece. And so this is also the first time that, one, I'm using my mother, but to also have someone of, an elder in my painting, which is really a privilege. And so, my mother over the years would say, you need to put some elders up in your paintings. I'm like, okay, Mom, yeah, I'll get there. So this is also like just a dedication to her as well,
It's beautiful.
Yeah, because a lot of times, we leave, ageism, and I want to, this, not only this piece is a marker or an obstacle that I'm overcoming in terms of scale, but also in terms of painting the male figures, because I typically only paint women, and also in terms of representation of ages within my piece.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, also too, you can be like, I'll put y'all in that painting that's in that museum.
Right, right. Like, don't say I never did anything nice for you, okay? So yeah, this.
But I think for young people, this is very special to go into spaces, not just museums, but collectors' homes, to go into galleries and to see yourself. So this is just on an individual level for your children to be, kind of my mother's magic, and I'm a part of that.
Yeah. So this is my sister, who is so fascinating. Her story is so unique. She was struck by lightning as a kid. So I get to depict her as this like badass contemporary storm figure, literally. And so as this piece unfolds, it's, I look at it as me listening to the work and me giving them what they need to come to life. And so, part of this figure is she's going to have some lightning and I don't know how it's going to present itself, but that's what it essentially commands. And again, this act of storytelling and this very improvisational process of painting, it's about applying and also listening.
Yeah.
Like what's going to make this story really juicy? You know what I mean? Yeah.
Let's get real for a moment. If you didn't know, you're a Black woman.
Definitely.
You're out here innovating. You are literally at the forefront. Yes, there are Black artists, female artists in the world on the scene.
Yeah.
There's not a lot.
Right.
Right? Who are making it happen, who are opening the doors, who are part of the canon.
Yeah.
So do you think about that, particularly in terms of representation? The young woman who pulled you inside and talked about the monumental aspect of your work. And I think of I just wonder your kids, when they look at mommy.
Yeah.
Do they know? Probably for them it's just mommy, but
Right.
Because mommy's a big time artist.
Mommy's trying, I'm trying.
No, mommy is.
Yeah. Okay. All right, there it is. I am. Well, one is two-part. Like I've been married for 17 years. I got married at age 22. I had my son, 2 months after I walked across the stage of undergrad. So, I was blessed to be a young parent. It depending on the perspective, it could be a blessing or a curse. For me, it was really a blessing, and I've been able to do and make the sort of moves that I've made because of, my husband holding me down, like, I got you, do what you gotta do, and those beautiful boys that I have inspiring me. And, I do wanna touch on with like motherhood, what what it helped me to understand about myself. And, you know, I had 3 natural births, right? And it taught me like how powerful I am, you know what I mean? Having that sort of pain and close to death, it's like I'm not afraid of that. I could fight a bear right now. Like there's nothing, I could take a bullet. Like if I can do that, but it shows me, you know, as a small, petite woman, what I'm capable of, and you know, to have the privilege of taking part of one of the most ancient rituals ever since the beginning of time, the chicken or the egg, what came first, right? So I have that privilege, and you know, as I mentioned before, my son's motherhood teaches me like how to be a mother, how to be, you know, even in womanhood, you know, just, you know, how I fashion myself, how I, you know, raise my sons, you know, just the values that I want to instill in them. And I also want to know, like, going back to 2020, right? You know, the world, it was so chaotic, and I had a toddler. My son was 3 at the time. And I had this little person who had no clue what was going on.
And what life was supposed to be like.
He had no clue who Donald Trump was.
Exactly.
And I was able to witness a level of joy, you know what I mean, that I had access to.
Exactly.
While, you know, watching the news and the anxiety, you know, as we're 1 year, you know, as we're filming this, yesterday was the 1 year anniversary of the insurrection, right? So
the coup attempt.
The failed coup. But I had this child who was just like living his life, and that was that reminder of no matter what's going on in the world, they teach me like, yo, it's still popping in here. We have our own world in our home, in our spaces. So they understand what I'm doing. I'm very blessed to have like 3 very brilliant, and I throw the G word around, genius children, a genius partner, you know, and I've been able to just come across so many genius people that is just like really feeling not just in my life, but theirs as well. You know what I mean? They live in a world where they can see their mother being interviewed by, you know, an entrepreneur, you know, a person who's doing this life calling. So it's just even, you know, just a privilege for me to just introduce that to my kids, which I didn't necessarily have, you know, growing up. This painting that I'm currently working on, I'm incorporating my family members, including my sons. So this is the first time that I'm doing that. So for them, you know, to even, I can imagine what that's like, you know, from their perspective, to see themselves immortalized in their mother's painting that's going to go in this institutions, right?
In the canon.
In the canon.
So Mario Moore has this amazing painting called The Council. I was privileged to see it when it was in his studio. And it features you, Titus Kaffar, Mark Gibson, and Mario. And it is inspired by this 17th century Dutch painting. And you know, Mario has his whole research and everything he does about it. But you're at the head of that table. Jamea, tell me what you're bringing to that table. What is that conversation? Because you got something to say at that table.
I have a lot to say. You know, what's interesting is 2020, myself and a couple of other artists, we created this kind of I don't know if you want to call it an underground collective or offline, which wasn't broadcast on social media, network of just conversations, think tanks. And you know, I was the like main instigator. It was my idea, and I'm like, yo, I hit up my girl Helena Metaferia, and I'm like, we need to have conversations. The world is in chaos right now. Artists need a space to just discuss what's on our mind. We've never had conversations before. Well, a lot of times within you know, just within all arts, we tend to not speak to one another we don't trust one another, and I felt like this space was very necessary. So there was this collective created called The Circuit, and we wrote a manifesto and everything.
I'm down with a manifesto.
Oh my gosh. And you know, the decision was made to not broadcast it, to not advertise it. And so this was this space we were able to really kind of really protect ourselves, really to lift one another up, to really say, yo, you have an ally here, you know, I'm gonna hold you down. And so from there, you know, Mario and I, we had a series of conversations just about like, what we're the new Renaissance.
Exactly.
We have the power to do whatever we want to do.
Yeah.
And so like, let's move on code or move with intention. And so, you know, I just thought for me in this post-Rona world, right? You know, those series of conversations and those connections I made really empowered me to be unapologetic about certain moves that need to be made. It really encouraged me and to be unapologetic with expressing my feelings, because a lot of times it was intimidation, like, okay, but maybe I shouldn't say this, or maybe, you know, I want to reach out to this person. There's been discussions on, you know, where we want our work to go, what type of custodianship we want for our work, and what power we have as artists, of, you know, artists of color. So, you know, that to me, that represents like this this bridge building, this this brotherhood, this sisterhood, and it for me, it represents, I'm saying it's a renaissance. And you know, I'm so blessed to be in the city of Detroit with Mario and so many other like dope artists during this time, because I've been away. I was in the DMV area, which was amazing, right? But it's different being in your hometown. So for me, I'm just looking forward to the future. And you know, a lot of the themes that we hear is we can't go back to normal. Normal was not good enough. And we are defining what this new normal is. You know, in our personal lives, and for, you know, the younger generation of artists, and we have to lead by example. So so that's what that represents. It's a optimism, it's an idealism, and and I don't even want to say it's in the ideal. For me, it's realism. It's reality. It's reality. We're inspiring one another. We're pushing one another to like be our best.
And that's what art is supposed to do. And Jamea, you are definitely at your best, and I thank you for taking the time to speak to me today.
Oh, thank you.